Do you ever feel like your energy just isn't what it used to be? Maybe you ache a little more. Or maybe you just worry a bit more about keeping your health strong as the years go by. It's completely normal. You know, we all want to stay active, vibrant, and independent for as long as possible. We pay attention to our doctor's advice. We try to move more. Maybe we even take vitamins. But sometimes, the things we eat every single day, the familiar, comforting foods we've enjoyed for decades, might actually be working against us without us even realizing it. It's a painful reality to think that something you love could be slowly impacting your health. Isn't it? It's not about being restrictive or feeling deprived. It's about understanding a little secret about how our bodies change after 65 and how certain foods, especially some common meats, interact with those changes. In this video, we're going to look at 4 specific types of meat that, while perhaps fine in your younger years, might be putting an unnecessary strain on your system now. Making small shifts away from these could make a bigger difference to your energy, your heart health, and how you feel day to day than you might imagine. Stay with me until the very end, because I'll share something that might truly surprise you about simple changes you can make today. So, let's start by talking about the first type of meat that you might want to think twice about after reaching that wonderful milestone of 65. And that's processed meats. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Processed meats like bacon or sausages. Yes, exactly. But it goes beyond just the breakfast staples. We're talking about things like deli meats, hot dogs, certain types of ham, jerky, and often those prepackaged burger patties or meatloaf mixtures you find in the grocery store. Why are these a particular concern as we get older? Well, there are a few main reasons, and they all tie back to how our bodies handle things differently now compared to when we were younger. Firstly, these processed meats are notoriously high in sodium, and while sodium is something we should all be mindful of, it becomes even more critical after 65. Our kidneys might not be quite as efficient at filtering out excess salt as they once were. High sodium intake is a major contributor to high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is a leading risk factor for heart disease, stroke, and kidney problems. Now, you might think, oh, I don't add much salt to my food. But the sodium in processed meats is often hidden. A few slices of deli ham or a couple of sausages can contain a significant portion of your recommended daily sodium limit, sometimes even exceeding it in a single meal. This constant influx of high sodium puts a real strain on your cardiovascular system day after day, year after year. It forces your heart to work harder to pump blood, and it can damage the delicate lining of your blood vessels. Imagine trying to push thick syrup through a narrow pipe. That's a bit like what high blood pressure does to your arteries. Secondly, processed meats are often loaded with unhealthy fats, particularly saturated fats and sometimes even trans fats used in processing. While the jury is still out on the exact role of saturated fat for everyone, for those over 65 who are already at higher risk for heart issues, reducing these fats is generally a good idea. These fats can raise your LDL cholesterol, often called the bad cholesterol, which can build up in your arteries and contribute to blockages. Think of it like sludge building up in those pipes we talked about earlier. Over time, this buildup restricts blood flow, increasing the risk of heart attack or stroke. Our bodies also tend to hold onto fats differently as we age, sometimes storing them around vital organs, which can contribute to inflammation and other metabolic issues. But perhaps one of the most significant concerns with processed meats, especially for an older population, is the presence of nitrates and nitrites. These are chemicals added to cured meats to preserve them, give them their color, and prevent bacterial growth in the body. These nitrates and nitrites can be converted into compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are known carcinogens, substances that can cause cancer. Research, including reports from organizations like the World Health Organization, has linked regular consumption of processed meats to an increased risk of certain cancers, particularly colorectal cancer. As we age, our cellular repair mechanisms might not be as robust as they once were. potentially making us more vulnerable to the damaging effects of these compounds over time. It's a cumulative effect. You see, a lifetime of regularly eating these can contribute to risk down the line. So, when you combine the high sodium, the unhealthy fats, and the potentially cancer-causing nitrates, nitrites, processed meats become a significant dietary red flag, especially after 65. It's not about saying you can never have a hot dog at a family barbecue or a slice of ham on a special occasion, but it's about making them the rare exception rather than a regular part of your diet. What can you do instead when you're making a sandwich? Opt for slices of leftover roast chicken or turkey breast cooked yourself, not deli meat, or even hummus and vegetables. Instead of sausages for breakfast, try scrambled eggs with spinach and mushrooms, or oatmeal with fruit and nuts. Look for nitrate-free or uncured versions of meats if you absolutely must. But be aware that some of these still contain naturally occurring nitrates from sources like celery powder. And it's the processing itself and the overall nutritional profile that are key concerns. The goal is to reduce your exposure to these compounds and lower your intake of excess sodium and unhealthy fats. Now, let's move on to the second type of meat to be cautious about. And this one might be a bit surprising to some because it's often seen as a healthier red meat option. I'm talking about conventional ground beef, especially the higher fat varieties. While beef itself can be a good source of protein and iron, how it's processed and the fat content really matter as we age. Conventional ground beef, particularly types like 80-20, meaning 80% lean, 20% fat, is often higher in saturated fat than leaner cuts. We just talked about why saturated fat is a concern for heart health after 65. When you cook ground beef, that fat renders out. Yes, but you still consume a significant amount, and it contributes to calorie intake without adding much in the way of micronutrients compared to leaner options. Eating high-fat meats regularly can contribute to weight gain, which in turn puts more strain on your joints and increases your risk for conditions like type 2 diabetes and sleep apnea, all of which become more common concerns after 65. Beyond the fat content, there are often concerns about the way conventional ground beef is produced. In large-scale production, meat from many different animals is often combined, increasing the potential risk of bacterial contamination like E. coli, while proper cooking kills these bacteria. Older adults are often more susceptible to severe illness from foodborne pathogens due to weaker immune systems. Symptoms that might cause a younger person a few uncomfortable hours could be life-threatening for someone over 65. It's something worth considering when making your choices. Furthermore, conventional feedlot cattle are often given antibiotics to prevent illness in crowded conditions and hormones to promote growth. While regulators say these are safe, some people prefer to minimize their exposure to these substances through their diet, as our bodies become a bit less resilient. Reducing our exposure to potential stressors, however small, might be a wise approach. So, instead of reaching for that package of 80-20 ground beef for your chili or meatballs, consider opting for leaner versions like 90-10 or even 93-7 ground beef or ground turkey or chicken breast. These provide the protein you need with much less saturated fat. You can also enhance flavor with herbs, spices, vegetables, and broths instead of relying on fat. When you do buy ground meat, look for options from animals raised without antibiotics or hormones if that's important to you. Or consider grass-fed beef, which often has a slightly different fat profile, including more omega-3 fatty acids. Another great alternative is incorporating plant-based proteins into your meals more often. Lentils, beans, mushrooms, or plant-based meat substitutes, but read the labels on those to check sodium and processing. Making this switch is a relatively easy way to cut down on unhealthy fats and potential contaminants without sacrificing flavor or protein. Now that we've talked about processed meats and conventional ground beef, let's move on to another type of meat that might be silently causing issues for you. Now that we've discussed processed meats and conventional high-fat ground beef, and why they might be less ideal choices after 65, Let's turn our attention to the third type of meat that warrants consideration: conventionally raised pork. Specifically fatty cuts like pork belly, spare ribs, and certain pork chops. Just like with conventional ground beef, the concerns here largely revolve around fat content and farming practices. But pork has its own nuances. Pork, especially the fattier cuts, is often very high in saturated fat. We've already touched on why excess saturated fat is a concern for heart health as we age. It can raise LDL cholesterol and contribute to plaque buildup in your arteries. Think about those beautiful marbled pork chops or a rack of ribs. That marbling is primarily fat, while flavorful. It's a significant dose of saturated fat in one sitting. Regularly consuming meals high in saturated fat can contribute to inflammation throughout the body. Chronic low-grade inflammation is like a smoldering fire inside you. It's been linked to a whole host of age-related diseases, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, and even cognitive decline. Our bodies, as they age, may not be as effective at managing this inflammatory response. So anything we can do through our diet to reduce inflammation is a win. Beyond the fat, conventional pork farming often involves crowded conditions, leading to concerns about animal welfare and the potential for disease spread. This is another area where antibiotics are frequently used, not just to treat illness but sometimes preventatively, or even to promote faster growth. Again, while regulated, the cumulative effect of consuming meat from animals treated with antibiotics over many years is something to consider, particularly in light of the growing concern about antibiotic resistance. While cooking meat thoroughly usually mitigates immediate bacterial risks, thinking about the broader impact on our food system and personal health adds another layer to the decision-making process. Certain parasites can also be a concern with pork, though less so in countries with strict regulations now than in the past. Still, consuming undercooked pork carries risks that might be more severe for an older adult with a less robust immune system. While not as common as bacterial issues, it's a historical reason why pork has sometimes been viewed with more caution. So, what's a better approach when it comes to pork after 65 if you enjoy pork? Focus on leaner cuts and prioritize quality. Leaner cuts include pork tenderloin, center-cut pork chops trimmed of visible fat, and sometimes ground pork that is labeled extra lean. When preparing these, use healthier cooking methods like baking, grilling, or stir-frying instead of frying. You can also explore sourcing options like pasture-raised or organic pork, which often come from farms with different practices regarding antibiotics and animal living conditions. While these might be more expensive, consuming them less often and choosing higher quality when you do can be a good compromise. Another strategy is simply to reduce the frequency with which you eat pork, especially the fatty cuts. Perhaps save those spare ribs for a very occasional treat rather than a weekly staple. Replacing pork meals with chicken, fish, or plant-based meals a few times a week can significantly reduce your intake of saturated fat and potential additives. It's not about eliminating pork entirely, but about being more selective about the cut, the quality, and how often it appears on your plate. Now, let's move on to the fourth and final type of meat we're going to discuss. And this one is often overlooked but can be a real challenge, particularly for digestion as we get older. We're talking about tough, fatty cuts of red meat that are conventionally raised. Think about some cuts of steak that aren't lean, like a regular sirloin or T-bone that hasn't been trimmed well, or even beef short ribs. While red meat in moderation can be a good source of iron, B vitamins, and protein, the combination of toughness and high fat in certain cuts can be hard on an aging digestive system. As we age, our digestive processes can slow down. We may produce less stomach acid and digestive enzymes, which are essential for breaking down protein and fat. Tough, fatty meat requires a significant amount of digestive effort. When it's not broken down efficiently, it can sit in the stomach and intestines for longer, leading to discomfort, bloating, gas, and even constipation. It can also exacerbate issues like acid reflux. Imagine your digestive system as a machine that's been running for 65 plus years. It might not have the same processing power as it did when it was new, giving it tough. Hard to break down food puts extra strain on it. Furthermore, the high saturated fat content in these cuts adds to the digestive burden and contributes to those long-term health risks we've already discussed: heart disease, inflammation, and weight management challenges. It's a double whammy, hard to digest and contributing to systemic health issues. Conventionally raised tough. Fatty red meat often comes with the same concerns as conventional ground beef and pork regarding antibiotics, hormones, and potential contaminants from large-scale farming. While proper cooking is crucial, focusing on higher quality and leaner cuts can help reduce exposure and improve digestibility. So, what should you do if you love red meat? Choose leaner cuts like tenderloin, flank steak, or sirloin that has been well trimmed. Focus on portion size. You likely don't need a giant steak. Prepare it using methods that make it easier to chew and digest, like slow cooking, stewing, or marinating to tenderize it. Cooking meat thoroughly, but not overcooking it to the point where it becomes dry and even tougher, is also important. Consider choosing grass-fed or organic beef for potentially better fat profiles and different farming practices. But perhaps the most effective strategy is similar to the others: reduce the frequency and portion size of red meat, especially the tough, fatty cuts. Try having red meat only once or twice a week, focusing on those leaner, higher quality options when you do. Fill the rest of your week with easier to digest proteins like fish, chicken, eggs, beans, lentils, tofu, and nuts. Your digestive system, your heart, and your overall energy levels will likely thank you. It's about making conscious choices that support your body as it is now, not punishing yourself or feeling deprived. It's about finding joy in delicious, nourishing foods that help you thrive. So, we've talked about processed meats, conventional high-fat ground beef, fatty cuts of conventional pork, and tough, fatty cuts of conventional red meat. It might seem like a lot to think about, but remember, this isn't about perfection or eliminating entire food groups overnight. It's about gaining awareness and making gradual, positive changes that support your health journey after 65. Think of it less as stopping and more as reducing and replacing. Replacing processed deli meat with leftover roasted chicken. Choosing leaner ground options, opting for pork tenderloin instead of ribs occasionally, and selecting a smaller, leaner cut of steak less often. These seemingly small shifts really do add up over time. They can help lower your risk of heart disease and stroke, potentially reduce your risk of certain cancers, improve your digestion, help manage inflammation, and even boost your energy levels because your body isn't working so hard to process foods that are challenging for it. You know, living well after 65 isn't just about adding years to your life. It's about adding life to your years. It's about having the energy to play with your grandchildren, to pursue hobbies, to travel, or simply to enjoy the quiet moments without discomfort or worry. Making thoughtful choices about the meats you eat is one powerful tool in your toolbox for achieving that. It's empowering to know that you have control over so many aspects of your health just by adjusting what's on your plate. It might feel daunting at first, changing habits that have been with you for decades. But take it one step at a time. Maybe this week, you focus on swapping out your regular deli meat for something else. Next week, perhaps you try a leaner version of ground meat in your favorite recipe. Small, consistent steps lead to lasting change. And here's that surprising thing I mentioned earlier. Many people find that when they reduce their intake of these heavier, fattier, and more processed meats, their taste buds actually change. They start to appreciate the natural flavors of leaner proteins, vegetables, grains, and legumes more. They discover new favorite meals that are both delicious and incredibly nourishing. You might find you feel lighter, have less digestive upset, and maybe even notice improvements in things like joint stiffness. It's a ripple effect throughout your body. Don't underestimate the power of these dietary changes, not just for your physical health, but for your mental well-being and overall quality of life. It's a form of self-care, a way of honoring and supporting the body that has carried you this far. Think about trying some of these alternatives, incorporating more fish rich in omega-3s, like salmon or mackerel, which are wonderful for heart and brain health and usually easy to digest. Exploring plant-based protein powerhouses like lentils, chickpeas, black beans, and tofu, which are packed with fiber great for digestion and essential nutrients. Even incorporating more eggs into your diet, which are a fantastic source of high-quality protein. It's not about deprivation. It's about expanding your horizons and finding delicious, healthier options that truly fuel you. Remember, your health is your greatest wealth, especially as you move through your 60s, 70s, and beyond. Making informed choices about the food you eat is one of the most proactive steps you can take to protect that wealth and ensure you can continue to live your life to the fullest. Don't let old habits silently undermine your health goals. Be curious, be open to trying new things, and be kind to yourself throughout the process. I'd love to hear from you. What are your favorite healthy protein sources? Have you already made changes to the types of meat you eat? Share your experiences or questions in the comments below. Your insights could help someone else in our community. If you found this information helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us reach more people who could benefit from this advice. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel for more tips and information on living your best, healthiest life at every age. Thank you for watching. And here's to your health and happiness. Live your best life at every age.